All right, so today we're going to kind of deep dive into how cultural differences
Yeah.
impact leadership, especially when you're working with uh, teams all across the globe. It's such a
Mhm.
critical topic,
Yeah.
and we're really excited to be digging into an article today by Miguel Nogral, who's an executive coach,
Right.
and he's been helping leaders navigate this for years.
Yeah, for a long time.
Uh,
And
he's got some fascinating insights, especially from his own experience moving from Brazil to Silicon Valley.
yeah, I mean that's a huge culture shift right there.
Well, and what I think is really cool is that he didn't just experience like a culture shock in terms of, day-to-day life,
Mm.
but he also had to figure out how to operate within two very different business cultures.
Yeah, I mean, unpack that a little bit for me.
Yeah.
What were some of the biggest differences that he had to adjust to?
So think about something like trust, With
Okay.
Brazil, Nogral was used to building trust through these personal face-to-face relationships.
Yeah.
Business really blended with personal life.
And that trust grew gradually.
Right.
But then he moves to Silicon Valley
Yeah.
and it's like bam. It's all about transactional efficiency.
Yeah.
Direct communication, getting things done, keeping things moving.
So it's almost like even though everyone is speaking English,
Yeah.
he still had to learn like a whole new language in a way.
Exactly. It's not just about the words you use, it's about understanding those unspoken rules of the game.
Right.
And Nogural, he actually had to become more direct with his U.S. colleagues, but
Yeah.
still maintain that relationship-driven approach with his Latin American teams.
Oh, that's got to be tough.
Yeah.
A real balancing act.
It is, and then it gets even more complex because you start to think about the fact that even within Latin America, you
Yeah.
have these different cultural norms at play.
Right.
Nogural observed that in some countries like Mexico and Argentina, hierarchical leadership was just kind of the norm,
Yeah.
whereas in other places like Chile and Colombia, they were much more focused on consensus building.
Right.
So even if you think you're dealing with, one region.
The same language,
Mhm.
it doesn't necessarily mean
Right.
everyone's approaching leadership
Yeah.
the same way.
Exactly. And that's where things get really interesting in this article because he goes on to use a couple of case studies
Okay.
to really show how these cultural differences play out in real life leadership scenarios.
Yeah.
These aren't hypothetical situations.
Right.
These are like stories of executives who've had to learn and adapt and sometimes stumble their way to success.
Okay, now I'm hooked. Give me that first case study.
All right. So imagine you're an American executive and you've spent 15 years in Russia,
Okay.
leading with a certain style,
Right.
very direct, very authoritative, very top down.
Mm-hmm.
Now you get transferred to Latin America.
Right.
You're facing a totally different set of expectations.
Yeah, that's a huge culture shock.
Yeah.
What were some of the biggest hurdles that executive faced?
So he really struggled with three key things.
Okay.
Leadership style, building trust, and decision making.
Got it.
In Russia, his command and control style worked.
Hmm.
But in Latin America, he needed to learn to build relationships first.
Okay.
Trust wasn't just earned by getting results.
Yeah.
It came from personal connections.
Right.
And that rapid-fire, top-down decision-making he was used to,
Right.
that wasn't going to fly
I don't know.
in a culture that values discussion and consensus.
Yeah. So how did he turn things around? Did he just completely abandon everything he had learned in Russia?
Well, he had to adapt.
Yeah.
He realized that building personal bonds was really key.
Yeah.
So spending time with his team outside of work,
Yeah.
showing genuine interest in their lives, that all started to shift the dynamics.
Yeah.
He learned to balance his authority with a more approachable style, involving key people and decisions,
Right.
but still providing clear direction.
Yeah.
And he also had to kind of master this art of indirect communication, especially when giving feedback.
So he kind of had to rewire his whole leadership approach, essentially. Did it
Yeah.
work?
It did. Within 9 months, he had built these strong relationships, improved operational efficiency, and boosted their bottom line.
Wow.
So it really shows you the power of cultural adaptation.
Yeah.
It's not just a nice to have, it's
Right.
really a must have for global leaders.
That's a powerful example. All right, what about that second case study?
All right, so this one features a senior leader from Europe who was promoted to oversee manufacturing facilities across the Americas.
Okay.
So think US, Canada, and several Latin American countries.
Wow. Talk about a juggling act. Managing across 3 different regions,
Yeah,
each with their own cultural nuances.
exactly.
What kind of challenges did he run into?
So he was used to that very structured, process-oriented approach that's common in Europe, where
Uh-huh.
efficiency and meeting deadlines were paramount.
Yeah.
But when he came to the Americas, he quickly realized that a one-size-fits-all leadership style wasn't going to work.
So did he basically have to become like a cultural chameleon?
He did. He
That,
had to adapt. He realized that in North America, maintaining a more structured and results-oriented approach made sense.
yeah.
But in Latin America, it was all about building those personal relationships, just like in our previous case study.
I'm starting to see a pattern here. I mean, it sounds like relationships really do matter in certain cultures,
Yeah.
but I'm curious, how did he manage to build trust in such different environments?
Mm-hmm.
Like building trust in Germany sounds totally different from building trust in, say, Brazil.
You're absolutely right. It's a multifaceted thing.
Yeah.
He discovered that in places like Germany and Northern Europe, trust is really built through competence and efficiency.
Okay.
You prove you can get things done and you're golden.
Mm-hmm.
In the US, it's often more task-based.
Right.
You fulfill your responsibilities, you meet your deadlines, you earn that trust.
Oh.
But in Latin America,
Yeah.
it all came back to those personal connections.
Yep.
He had to invest time in face-to-face interactions, site visits, informal conversations.
So he really had to learn a whole new playbook for building trust, depending on what part of the Americas he was in.
Mm-hmm.
What a challenge. But I think these case studies are making one thing super clear.
Yeah.
You can't just rely on one leadership style if you're going to be a successful global leader.
Yeah.
You've really got to understand and adapt to that cultural context.
That's the crux of it. And that's where this culture map framework comes in.
Okay.
Nogueral uses this framework, which was developed by Erin Meyer,
Mm-hmm.
to help his clients navigate these complex cultural differences. And it essentially breaks down culture into 8 key dimensions that shape how we interact in the workplace.
8 dimensions.
Wow.
Okay, give me the quick rundown. What are they?
So we've got communicating,
Okay.
evaluating, persuading,
Mm-hmm.
leading,
Got it.
deciding,
Okay.
trusting,
Yeah.
disagreeing,
Mhm.
and scheduling.
So each of those kind of has like 2 contrasting styles.
Exactly.
I see.
So you can start to see the spectrum of approaches across different cultures.
So it's like a cultural decoder ring.
It kind of is.
That's amazing. Okay, so we've got these 8 dimensions, and they're all sort of influencing how people lead and interact. To really make this practical for our listeners, let's choose 3 of them
Okay.
and really dive in a little bit deeper. Look at how they play out in real-world scenarios and share some of Nogueral's tips for how you can adapt your leadership approach. What do you think?
Sounds great. Let's do it.
All right, which dimensions are we tackling first?
Let's start with communicating, how directly do people express themselves?
Yeah.
That's what this dimension is all about.
Got it.
And it really comes down to the difference between low context and high context cultures.
Okay, low context versus high context.
Yeah.
I feel like I've heard those terms before.
Yeah.
But I got to be honest, they've always sounded a little bit academic to me.
Yeah.
Like, could you break it down in a way that's relevant to real-life leadership challenges?
Totally. So imagine you're working on a project with a team in Germany,
Okay.
and you need to give some critical feedback. You're probably thinking, all right, just be direct, be clear, lay it all out.
Yeah.
That's because Germany, like the US or Canada, is a low context culture.
Okay.
People say what they mean and they mean what they say.
Right.
There's not a lot of reading between the lines.
No need to sugarcoat it, just get straight to the point.
Exactly. Now imagine you're working with a team in Japan.
Yeah.
Same situation. You need to give feedback.
Yeah.
But in this case, being blunt and direct could really backfire.
I see.
Because Japan is a high context culture
Okay.
where communication relies heavily on these unspoken cues, shared understanding.
Done.
You got to read between the lines a little bit.
So you got to be a bit more subtle, a little
And
more diplomatic.
Nogueral gives a great example in the article.
It's okay.
Think about how you tell someone their report needs improvement.
Yeah.
In Germany, a low context culture, you might just say, this report needs more data. Please update it.
Straight to the point.
Right. But in Japan, you might say something like, this report is very thorough.
Hmm.
Perhaps there are some areas we could explore further.
Okay, so same message, completely different delivery.
Yeah.
The Japanese approach is way more indirect,
Mm-hmm.
but you still get the point across.
Right. And that's the key. As a leader, if you're working across cultures, you need to be aware of these differences. In low context cultures, clarity and conciseness are really key.
Yeah.
But in high context cultures, you need to tune in to those subtle cues and really listen for what's not being said.
Almost like you're learning a whole new layer of communication.
It is.
That's fascinating. Okay, what's our next dimension?
Let's talk about leading. which focuses on how different cultures perceive authority and hierarchy.
Okay.
So, do employees expect a more egalitarian approach,
Yeah.
or is there a clear chain of command?
Right. So we're talking about those like flat versus hierarchical structures that you often hear about.
Exactly.
Uh-huh.
How does that play out in a global leadership context?
Yeah. Well, think of countries like the Netherlands or Sweden.
Yeah. They're known for their very egalitarian cultures.
Yeah.
Leaders are accessible, they're collaborative, and it's totally fine to challenge ideas even if they come from the top.
So everyone has a voice, everyone can contribute.
Exactly. Decisions are often made with input from various levels of the organization.
Okay.
But now think about countries like Russia or China.
Yeah.
They tend to have much more hierarchical cultures
Okay.
where leaders hold a position of authority
Yeah.
and employees respect that hierarchy.
So probably not the best move to like openly challenge your boss.
Probably not. It's
Yeah.
all about understanding those unspoken rules again.
Right.
Nogarol gives an example here.
Right.
Imagine a junior employee has a different perspective
Yeah.
on a strategic decision.
Okay.
In an egalitarian culture like the Netherlands, they might just openly voice their disagreement in a meeting.
Yeah.
But in a hierarchical culture like Mexico,
Yeah.
that same employee would likely be much more cautious and deferential.
Totally makes sense. So again, it's not that one approach is right or wrong.
Right.
It's just about understanding norms
Yeah.
and adjusting accordingly.
Exactly. And as a global leader, you need to adapt your style to fit the context. And egalitarian cultures invite that open debate, encourage participation, be open to challenges.
Yeah.
But in those hierarchical cultures, be mindful of rank and authority, show respect for seniority,
Okay.
and be prepared to make decisions with less direct input from the lower ranks.
So it's about striking that balance between empowering your team and also respecting those cultural expectations around leadership.
Right.
Okay, we've covered communicating and leading.
Yeah.
What's our final dimension for today?
Let's explore trusting.
Okay.
How do people build trust in different cultures?
That's such a crucial question.
Yeah.
Especially when you're working with people from different backgrounds.
Yeah.
You know, it's like the foundation of any successful collaboration.
It's huge.
Tell me more about these different approaches.
All right. So imagine you're working in the U.S., which is a very task-based culture.
Yep.
You consistently deliver on your commitments, you meet your deadlines, you go above and beyond. You're basically saying, trust me because I get things done.
Actions speak louder than words in this case.
Exactly. But now imagine you're working in Brazil,
Okay.
which is a very relationship-based culture.
All right.
Here, trust isn't just about competence. It's about forging those personal connections. It might involve, having lunch together, getting to know each other's families, sharing personal stories.
So you build a bond before you get down to business. I
Yeah.
can imagine that could feel kind of uncomfortable for someone from a task-oriented culture.
It definitely can. And that's why it's so important to be aware of these differences. Nogarol highlights this really key distinction.
Okay.
In task-based cultures, trust is often built through delivering results.
Okay.
In relationship-based cultures, it's built through investing that time and effort in personal connections.
So how does this play out for global leaders? Do they have to choose one approach over the other?
Well, it's really about recognizing that dominant approach to trust in the culture that you're working with,
Okay.
and then adapting your style accordingly.
Got it.
In task-based cultures, focus on delivering those results, exceeding expectations,
Yeah.
letting your actions speak for themselves.
Okay.
But in relationship-based cultures, really invest that time in building those personal relationships.
Got it.
Engage in social interactions, get to know your colleagues on a personal level, show genuine interest in their lives.
So it's not about like being fake or pretending to be someone you're not.
Right.
It's just recognizing that different cultures have different ways of building trust
Exactly.
and adapting.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Okay. This is really making sense, I think. We've talked about communicating, leading, and trusting,
Yeah.
3 really fundamental aspects of leadership that are clearly influenced by culture.
For sure.
But I know there's so much more to this culture map framework. What are some of Nogarol's like key takeaways for global leaders based on all 8 dimensions?
So he actually offers 4 really practical recommendations that I think are useful for every leader to keep in mind when they're working across cultures.
Okay, lay them on me. I'm ready to take notes. Okay, lay them on me and I'm ready to take notes.
All right. So his first recommendation is pretty simple, but it's crucial. Develop your cultural awareness before you try to make any adjustments.
Yeah, you can't really adapt if you don't know what you're adapting to.
Exactly. It's like trying to navigate a city without a map.
Totally.
His next recommendation is all about tailoring your communication style to the audience.
Okay.
Remember, low context versus high context.
Yeah.
Being mindful of whether you need to be more direct or more nuanced in your approach.
Be a communication chameleon.
Exactly. And his third recommendation really builds on what we were talking about earlier, building trust according to the cultural norms.
Okay.
Task-based or relationship-based, you really need to know what makes people tick.
So if I'm working with a team in Germany, maybe I'm like laser focused on hitting those deadlines and showcasing my expertise.
Mhm.
But if I'm working with a team in Brazil, I'm prioritizing those informal coffee chats and team lunches.
Yeah, you got it.
Yeah.
And then his fourth recommendation is all about finding that sweet spot between being task-oriented and relationship-oriented.
Okay.
He calls it balancing task and relationship-based leadership.
So you're not necessarily choosing one or the other.
Yeah.
You're being flexible,
Yeah,
understanding when to dial up one approach, dial down the other.
exactly. And his final recommendation is to pay attention to how decisions are made in different cultures.
Okay.
Is it top-down or more consensus-driven? Adapt accordingly.
That's a great point, because in some cultures you might need to like gather input from a lot of people before you can move forward with anything.
Mm.
And in others, a quicker, more decisive approach might be what's expected. Okay, these are incredibly helpful tips. I feel like I'm starting to see the world through a whole new lens. It's not just about understanding different cultures. It's about using that understanding to actually become a more effective leader.
And that's exactly what No Girl emphasizes. Cultural intelligence isn't about saying one culture is better than another.
Right.
It's about recognizing that there are many different ways of doing things
Yeah.
and being adaptable enough to work successfully within those different cultural contexts.
It's like appreciating the richness that diversity brings to the table
Yeah,
and then using it to your advantage.
exactly.
This has been such an insightful deep dive into the world of cultural differences. I feel like I've got a whole new toolkit for navigating the complexities of global leadership.
I agree. It's a journey, not a destination.
Yeah.
The more you learn about different cultures, the more you realize there's always more to discover.
So as we wrap up, I want to leave our listeners with a challenge.
Ooh, I love a good challenge.
Think about those 8 dimensions of culture that we discussed. How might understanding those dimensions help you navigate your own professional interactions, whether it's within your team, with clients, or on a global scale?
That's a great question for everyone to ponder. It's not just theoretical.
Yeah,
It's about applying these insights to your own everyday life.
exactly.
Eh.
We'd love to hear your thoughts too, so share your experiences and your insights in the comments section. Let's keep this conversation going.
Because at the end of the day, we're all on this journey of cultural understanding together.
So keep learning, keep
Yep.
adapting, and keep embracing the richness of our diverse world. Until next time.
See ya.